All right. Well, this past week was a little bit better as far as production goes for us. Water levels starting to drop back out on us. We were catching some a little bit heavier winds toward the end of that week, this past week, and so we wanted to kind of get ourselves into some protected areas. It's not pretty average this upcoming week is what's going to be happening. So until we get to the latter part of this upcoming week, so just be prepared for yourself. But anyway, this past week we spent some time down here in Bray, getting in these back lakes here. We still had enough water that was holding in here. It still allowed us to get back in here and still have some pretty decent days, as opposed to the week before where everything was just really scattered, man. It was really difficult. This week was very refreshing. Found some fish on a consistent basis, working in the back lakes, throwing some top water, throwing our plastics as normal. Again, 16th ounce jig heads, because we're back into that thigh to knee deep water, so you don't really want anything that's super heavy. 16th ounce works great, or you throw like your double D, which is an ascending bait, and then of course we worked in some top water, whether it be the Spook Junior or the Lele, which is a little bit smaller bait. So we're on the backside of that new moon phase now. We're into the wild card days, so that's why we want to have a little variation in size and profile of our baits working. So we spent some time in here working the outer edge down here in Bray, all the way back around to the point where the little Texas Parks and Wildlife building is, back around to that edge that way there. And of course, worked a little bit deeper on some of the reefs that were on that. Found a few fish that were holding. Say we were still air temp and water temp are still holding in that upper 70s, 78, 79, low 80s, 81, 82, which is very comfortable. Not too cool or anything. One thing I would suggest to you, if you have not done it and you're big wade fisherman, make sure you got those waders ready to go. So there's a couple of weeks ago, we had water just temps that were in that mid to low 70s where you might have needed it, but you could adjust to it pretty quickly. Right now, it's still, very comfortable to do that, but looks like we have some stuff that's coming later in this week that might be our first legitimate cool front, if you will, that's coming. Looks like by Thursday, we've got some higher winds that'll be pumping in here on Wednesday and Thursday. And then Friday, it looks like that northeast wind's going to be cranking in here around 20 or so. It looks like it's going to bring some cool air with it. So you're going to wake up that morning, that water temp's going to be much chillier than it was the day before. So just be prepared for that. That's what it looks like right now. Obviously, that's subject to change. That's a little bit further out. But it's always good to be prepared for that kind of stuff. So, but we work this back shoreline in the Madre area over the grass and the edge and the potholes that are back in there, and all that kind of set up for us really well. Found scattered redfish, found some good trout that were back in here, and again, the main baits that we were throwing. Water was a little bit off color back in here, so we kind of varied back and forth with some more solid color baits like Rogue in the Knock and Tail. The Bone Diamond, White Ice has still been pretty good for us. Watermelon Red produced for us pretty well in the Little Johns and Little John XL. Purple Demon as well. More solid color baits. The Greenbacks did good for us. And then, of course, the down south there was Watermelon Red in it, Magic Grass and those. And we were still throwing medium-sized, the 4-inch baits, kind of tapered back and forth between that and the 5-inch baits. Of course, Big Smooth has been good, and the darker baits as well. So it's just different variation of those baits that we've worked in these particular areas. Spent a lot of time down here around the shell, working all that, working the edges of that kind of stuff, and then just getting back out on the edge of the grass flats and just kind of spending time there. But all those different various of baits that we've thrown had certain amount of productivity for us. Nothing that really stood out that was really better than the others. So just a different time that we spent there. We had just different folks that were throwing different things, and we would have our opportunities with that. But again, the majors and the minors are the big deal for us. Always incorporate that into your day. And just make sure, pay attention to those tide reports, because when that big wind's going to come later in this week, it's going to blow some water out, and it's going to change what the water levels are. So make sure you pay attention to that and be safe. Over in Carlos, back in this area here, we had big southeast breeze this past week. A little bit of scattered rain here and there. We got a little sprinkle on, a little bit big deal, but not a big thing. But this time of year, it'd be a great idea to make sure you have a little rain jacket that you keep in your boat, or even maybe a light jacket that you just want to wear while you're out wading. So it's never a terrible idea, especially this time of year and how volatile the winds and the weather can be. Again, what I mentioned in the last video is we've got, looks like our first little cool front that's going to be pushing down on us later in the week. That's going to bring some pretty good wind, and looks like some cooler air that's going to come with that. And we're hoping that's going to fire up our fish and get them going. This past week was better than the week before as far as production goes, as far as finding and catching fish. Still working hard packed sand, grass, scattered shell. We work all this area here. You got the little shell bar that's right here in Carlos. It's a good little spot like that. I just call it a little banana reef, the way that it kind of rolls out there. Found some scattered trout that were on it, and then of course we worked up in here on the backside of Cedar Dugout around the shell bar on the inside and outside. It's got a nice little drop that's on this inside here, so it's always a good little area to work. And found some nice trout, solid trout that were in here in that slot, that 16 to 19 range. Found some scattered redfish in here. A couple of black drum. We got to bite our artificials, which is always a nice little surprise when that takes place. But working this type of structure that's in here was pretty good for us. Now, this area in here, when we had those bigger winds, toward the end of the week, kind of dirtied up on us, so we went with more of our darker baits. Like in the Knock and Tell, the Rogue was good for us. Watermelon Red in the Down South. In the Little John, the Watermelon Red worked well for us. More like a white. The Bone Diamond did good because it's a more solid bait, and that's kind of what you're wanting when you're into in the dirtier water. You want that solid color bait that kind of stands out in your contrast for you. So we kind of stuck to more of that color line, and of course in our profile size, in the being in the transitional moon, coming off that back side of the new moon phase, which was better for us than it was the first 5 days. So we're getting into those wild card days, and now we got weather that's fixing to really start to factor in for us too. So those are always things that you want to kind of pack in there when you're working these types of areas. You got a great amount of structure in it. Paying attention to what your water temperatures are, because it's going to be in those high 70s this coming week until that first little blow comes. Looks like potentially right now it's saying Thursday that it's going to be cooler air when you wake up on a Friday, or it may be Wednesday on Thursday morning it's going to be cooler. So when that cooler air is like that, don't be surprised if you go to bed on Tuesday or Wednesday night and it's water temps 77, 78, and you wake up and it's 69 to 70. So that's a drastic change. That's a big temperature drop overnight. So that drastically affects your fishing and where you want to be. So this is where these fish are going to start transitioning. But what we're hoping that's going to do, which it should, is put them into a feeding frenzy when they start to feel that temperature change. Like, oh, we need to put on some more weight and put on some body fat. So they're going to start eating and gorging more. So our fishing activity should really pick up for us. So wherever you're deciding to fish this upcoming week, make sure you keep that into factored in as what's going to take place with that. I would make sure that there is grass, which is always a common denominator no matter what time of year it is, that you're going to have more of a transition into more softer mud, not so much your hard pack or your shell, so maybe some clump shell. Make sure you figure that out wherever you're going to fish. These particular areas back in here, there's some areas here in Carlos on this back shoreline that it offers you that. When you get back in here where the old ICW goes, there's some good little areas here. You've got all that kind of structure that's in place. Plus, with the north-northeast wind, this whole side over here is protected. So, and those are key factors as well. So make sure you choose wisely this upcoming week. Really pay attention to what that tide report is. I can't stress that enough. Make sure you see where your majors and minors are going to be into your fishing day, and see what your weather pattern is going to be for this upcoming week to make sure you put yourself in the best position. Down here in Swan Lake, again, we had some better winds toward the end of the week, and it's starting to transition toward what our wintertime pattern would look like on a consistent basis. It haven't quite ramped up to it yet, but it's starting to be that way. You'll have those days where you have big, strong southeast breeze where that front starts to pull down. It's sucking a lot of energy out of it. That's why you have big, heavy wind days that come out of the southeast till that front arrives, and all of a sudden it turns around, it's just going to spit it back out you, and then it's going from 20 to 25 out of the southeast, and when the front arrives, then it's coming 20 to 25 out of the northeast. So those are always the things that it's really important when you're out on these open bay opportunity areas that you may have to cross, whether a shoreline is going to be set up for you properly, depending on when that front pushes through. Those are always factors into your fishing day this time of year moving forward into November, December, and January. These are going to be our most volatile times of the year when it's going to change on you on a dime, where you may have great situations set up on a particular shoreline, then all of a sudden the front pushes through and you're not prepared for it, and then all of a sudden it's like a terrible situation. So that's why it's really important. I stress that to you enough on these videos. Make sure that you're looking at a long-range forecast as far as what you've got wind-wise, whether these fronts are pushing through during the early morning hours, midday, late evenings, overnight. So it changes where you're going to fish and how you're going to approach a particular area. But Swan Lake offers this past week for us, the day that we've spent in there, we had mostly southeast breeze that we're kicking in here. East breeze is set up well for us. And again, enough water. We're finally starting to recede from the higher water from the weeks past, that is starting to get back to somewhat level levels wise for us. So we really want to take advantage of that. So we work on this back shoreline. And remember, we work a little bit on the outside, not as much out on these areas here. Of course, close to the grass shoreline, working the little drops, the potholes and areas. Throwing a topwater, throwing a lele that's in there. Lele's a really good little topwater bait, really erratic. So if you're having a really slow bite, you can tie one of those in and work over the top of those potholes, those big grass flats like that. And you can get some reactionary strikes with it because it's a small enough profile that's not going to overwhelm, and it's still that they may still want to eat that instead of maybe like what you'd say, a super spook or a one knocker that's a little bit bigger bait. Depending on, of course, the tone of those are a little bit different than what a spook junior would be. So they're just different options, and that's why you have different sizes on the topwater baits. But anyway, just another option for you. Again, water was a little bit more stained, so we stuck with more of our darker color baits in the down south, primarily in the 4-inch. Mainly, we threw more of the burner shad that was in here. Of course, the Little Johns and Little John XLs did pretty good for us. That profile and the length of that is not too big. It still worked for us. A little bit darker flavors in those. Worked out well for you. Or if you have another brand that you like to throw, whatever that may be, in their darker flavors, again, the ones I've been throwing primarily for several weeks now has been the Bone Diamond and White Ice, and those still have been pretty good for the most part. The Magic Grass has been good for us in the down south. Watermelon Red's been good for us in the down south. Big Papa, Twisted Tea, those have all been good baits for this kind of water. Especially the Twisted Tea has been pretty good. I'll have to remember that, because the Twisted Tea, we had a lot of production on that, both in the original size and the burner shad size. Just remember that. And of course, and then the Double D has worked for us in this really good. It's a sending bait, so it really helps you keep it out of that grass, and you really can bang it down into those potholes and then just kind of let it work its way back up. And we had a lot of good reactionary strikes on that. But we spend our time out here staying protected, keep an eye on what our wind patterns we're going to do. Again, we've got some cooler air supposedly coming in toward the end of this week, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday. Just kind of depends on when it gets here. When you have those big winds that are going to be pushing, you'll start feeling them probably Wednesday, I would imagine, start sucking that energy out of here, because we've got an approaching front. And that will be really the first significant one that's really going to drop the water temperature down if that cooler air stays with it. So when that takes place, that ambient temperature will drop that water temp overnight, and you'll be surprised if it drops it anywhere from 5 to 8 degrees. That's a significant thing. So make sure that you're over the right type of structure, and then you'll start to see the scarcity of bait too start running out of here once this water temp really starts to drop out of here, because it'll start migrating out. So all of those things are going to be key factors for you. Again, the majors and minors are going to be a main thing that you have to take in account for, really work around that time frame. Pay attention what your tide reports are, and make sure you pay attention what the weather reports are.